Hello and welcome guys, and welcome to this vlog. And yes, in this vlog we are going to discuss the supplementary which has been released for paper number 12B by the Institute of Cost Accountants of India a few days back. Guys, a supplementary of about 100 pages has been released by the institute, and all the students are wondering, sir, what are the big changes, what are the key differentiating factors of the erstwhile book which we have and the supplementary which has been released by the Institute of Cost Accountants of India. So guys, in this video I'm going to discuss the changes in detail, and the changes which definitely will be applicable for June 2020 examination. And yes, you should scan through all these changes carefully, because a question from these changes in the examination is most expected, because the examiner is really lured to pick up points or pick up questions from the changed syllabus which has been introduced by the Institute of Cost Accountants of India. And guys, if you are wondering, if you are already tensed about, sir, 100 pages of supplementary, so how are we going to do it, how are we supposed to do it, and sir, what are the changes, so are the changes too huge? So we have already studied from your book, and sir, we have done your book entirely. Sir, do we need to do the book again, or do we need to have a fresh copy of the book, because 100 pages of changes are there? Guys, relax. Yes, 100 pages of supplementary was released, but the changes are not much. There are very few changes which have been introduced. In fact, there are no changes. There are only expansion on certain topics which has been done by the institute. That's it. Minor changes. You will at max take 2 hours to cover all the changes, and I will upload the PDF of the chapter which is changed, which is chapter number 4, the company audit. I will upload the PDF in the description box below. You can just check out that PDF, take a printout of it, and you can refer to my book along with this PDF, and that will be all. That's it. You need not do anything else. It won't take more than 2 hours of your time to cover the entire supplementary, and the changes which are done in the supplementary. You'll be able to cover it very, very properly. So do not worry, do not panic. Your preparations are not going to go to waste, or you need not spend a lot of time on audit back again. If you have already studied it, you are really safe, because the changes are not much. So without further delay, let me come on to the changes. Guys, you have got my notes, or if you are referring to any other teacher's notes, then the chapter provision related to Companies Act, chapter 10, is the chapter which I am referring to over here. And guys, this chapter contains several aspects of companies audit, companies auditors, and how are companies auditors recruited, how are they qualified, disqualified, how do they come inside the company, how do they resign from the company, how do they leave the company. All the aspects related to company auditor are being discussed. The statutory provisions, the company law provisions with respect to the auditors are discussed in this chapter, and a quite heavy and a quite important chapter from your exam standpoint, because it holds a lot of weightage in your examination. So guys, what I have done is I have made the changes in track changes mode. So you can see, if you are referring to my notes, this is the normal font which is there in my notes, and the changed version will be seen in red color format like this. So the changed version have been highlighted for you, so that you need not do the entire chapter again, but you can just focus on the areas which have been changed. So those changed areas have been highlighted in red color, so you can just take care of it, and they have also been underlined. This is the track change mode in which I have done all the changes in my study note number 4. But yes, going forward, if any of the students would be purchasing my book, then that book will come with the updated notes, and that will be updated till the supplementary which has been released a few weeks back. Okay, so let's start with the changes which have been incorporated by the institute. Guys, the first change is manner and procedure of selection and appointment of auditor. Guys, this is rule 3 of, if you can see the footnote number 5, the Companies Audit and Auditors Rule 2014. So this provision tells you the manner in which auditor is to be appointed, and how is auditor to be selected out of choice of say 2, 3, 4 auditors. Who is going to choose the best one, who is going to choose the auditor for the company, the manner of selection and procedure of appointment of the auditor. So there are two circumstances, guys. Situation one, situation two. There are two different situations with this respect. Situation number one is companies in which audit committee has been constituted. Guys, I have already dealt with the audit committee in my earlier lectures, whereby I have told you that beyond a certain threshold you are required to have an audit committee. So what is this audit committee? So guys, audit committee is a focused group of people who are just focusing on the financial statements or the financial controls or the audit of a particular company. So typically for big companies, sometimes the function of finance or sometimes the function of audit, sometimes the function of financial controls is a bit neglected in day-to-day routine work. So to curb this problem, Companies Act has mandatorily imposed constitution of audit committee for certain category of companies. So I'm talking about those companies for whom audit committee has been constructed, and companies where audit committee has not been constructed. So situation where audit committee has been constructed, the manner and procedure of appointment of a auditor is as under. Audit committee should recommend the name of the auditor. Guys, please highlight the words which I am highlighting over here. The audit committee should recommend the name of the auditor to the board of directors. Guys, the ultimate responsibility of appointing the auditor rests with the board of directors. But if you have audit committee in place, then certainly that audit committee is obliged to recommend the name of the auditors whom do they think are fit, considering the size of the company, considering the complexity, nature of work which company does, all those stuff. So whom would the company think, whom would the audit committee think as per the size of the company, nature of work, complexity involved in the company, whom would audit committee recommend as the auditors? So the first step is that audit committee should recommend that who should be the auditors to the board of directors. Board of directors should not make this decision on their own. They should first have a recommendation from the audit committee. In case the board of directors do not agree with the name proposed by the audit committee, so suppose there's a conflict. Board of directors are saying, I want to appoint Mr. A as the auditor. Audit committee is saying, no, you should appoint Mr. B as the auditor. So if there's a conflict between board of directors and the audit committee, then what should be done? So guys, if there is synchronization between these two category of people, board of directors and audit committees, no problem in it. Our problem is solved. We will appoint that auditor who is actually recommended by the audit committee and accepted by the board of directors. Problem would come when the board of directors do not agree with the name proposed by the audit committee. They should record their reason for disagreement. They should record why, board of directors should record why they think that Mr. B should not be appointed as the auditor of the company. However, the decision of board of directors is conclusive and should be forwarded to the members in AGM. So as I've told you, the ultimate responsibility, the ultimate power rests with the board of directors to choose the auditor of a particular company. But the board of directors, before choosing a particular auditor, should take recommendations from the audit committee. And if they coincide, if the recommendation of the audit committee and the board of directors coincide, no problem in it. It's absolutely perfect. You can go ahead with the auditor who's being proposed by the audit committee and accepted by the board of directors. The challenge arises, what will happen if there is no synchronization between audit committee and board of directors with respect to auditors? If they both are fighting with each other with respect to auditors, then what should happen? Guys, in this case, ultimate decision will be of the board of directors. The choice of board of directors will be final, but they have to record in writing why did they think that audit committee's recommendation was not perfect or was not suitable for the company. Why do they think so? They have to record this point. Situation where companies in which audit committee has not been constituted, if you are not having any audit committee in your company, no problem guys. There's no situation of conflict. There is no situation of dilemma because obviously the board should recommend the name of the auditor members to the members in the AGM. The board has the power to recommend whom should be the auditor of that particular company. Then some common points: auditor's qualification, experience. Now this is very, very important guys. Obviously, auditor has to be a qualified person. So to carry out audit, which is the statutory audit, the auditor should be a chartered accountant. To carry out cost audit, the auditor should be a cost accountant. To carry out secretarial audit, the auditor should be company secretary. So guys, in this particular section, the company's audit, we are referring to the chartered accountants and we are referring to the auditors who will do statutory audit of this particular company. So the first and foremost thing which you need to see in that auditor is obviously his qualification. He should be well qualified, well equipped to statutorily as well as technically, he should be well equipped to carry on the audit of that particular company. Because if he's not qualified, then authenticity of his report will be challenged by people at large. We do not want him to be challenged at any forum. We don't want our auditors to be criticized at any forum. We don't want anyone to be pointing out fingers on our auditors. So naturally, our auditors should be chartered accountants. They should be well qualified people. And second very important thing is experience. Guys, qualification doesn't guarantee technical intelligence, technical soundness. Qualification doesn't guarantee it. If it's a big company, if you have a company worth rupees say 5,000 crores of turnover, you cannot employ a beginner's chartered accountant, a chartered accountant who's just started his practice or who's just a beginner. You cannot afford to do that. You need some experienced people. And this is exactly what was being considered by the audit committee and the board of directors while selecting a particular auditor. This is exactly what they were considering. So two things are important while choosing an auditor. Number one, his qualification. Number two, his experience as per the size of the company. So if you the company which you are dealing with is small company, is not that big company, is a small company in its turnover size, etc. Guys, no problem. You can definitely employ an inexperienced juvenile newbie chartered accountant. You can do that. But if you are a company which is huge in turnover, in terms of turnover, a company which is very complex in terms of its structure, its financial structure, its organizational structure, its working pattern, then you definitely need specialists. And by specialist, I mean that if you are into pharmacy sector, if you are into a pharmacy or medical sector, or you are into prescription of medical medicines, if you are into medicines which are a highly technical specialized field, then guys, you need an auditor who's done audit of some medicinal company like Ranbaxy, like Pfizer, like any other company who's into a medical area, healthcare area. You need to have an auditor who has an experience in that particular area. So experience doesn't only means number of years. Experience also means experience in the relevant industry in which you are in. So what will happen if the auditor is of that particular area, expertise in that particular area, or has experience in that particular, what will happen, guys? If the auditor has already performed audit of a particular area or a audit of a particular sector like pharmacy, like medicinal area, then he would be aware about the nuances, he would be aware about the errors or the problems which are faced by the pharmacy industry, and he will be able to better apply audit for all of you. This will happen if that particular person is experienced in that particular area. So you need to find an auditor who's experienced in your area of working, in which you are expertise, you are working in which you expertise in. So you need to find an auditor in that particular area. So two things are required. One is qualification, second is experience, and both audit committee and board of directors would definitely see for these two things in a particular auditor while choosing a particular auditor. Depending upon the size of the company, should be considered by audit committee or board of directors before recommending their name for appointment of the auditor. Appointment of the auditor shall be ratified by the members in AGM. Now this is an important point, guys, which we have already studied in our main section, that whatever appointment happens, it has to be ratified. Ratified means approved by the AGM, because an auditor typically would need two levels of approvals, one by the board of directors, second by the shareholders in the AGM. So board of directors typically do not approve but recommend the name, and the approval is sought by the shareholders, because shareholders are ultimately the party to whom the audit report will be addressed. So the addressee in the audit report is the shareholders of a particular company. So naturally, the appointment of the auditor should also be done by the shareholders of that particular company. It is not possible that appointment is done by some other person and the audit report is addressed to some other person. That is optically not possible, because it's not even logically correct that someone else is appointing you for doing audit and you are giving your report to someone else. That's not possible. And over here, guys, I would like to touch base upon section 148, the cost audit subsection. Please tell me, who would appoint the cost auditor? Is it the AGM or the shareholders or the board of directors itself? Guys, in case of cost audit, it is the board of directors itself. So the cost audit report is also directed towards the board of directors, because cost auditors are appointed by the board of directors. So cost audit report is also directed towards the board of directors. But in case of statutory audit, which is done by chartered accountants, the audit report is directed towards the shareholders. So the responsibility of appointment or the final approval which we take is also of the shareholders in the AGM. So this is the requirement of Rule 3. Then Form ADT1 is to be filed for appointment of auditor. So which form do you wish to file for appointment of the auditor? It is ADT1. It is prescribed by the Companies Act, and this form is to be filled and submitted to the Ministry of Corporate Affairs if you want to appoint the auditor. Then next is prerequisite before appointment of the auditor. So before appointing the auditor, guys, we need to be sure that auditor is perfect in every way. He is not disqualified in any way for being appointed as the auditor of your company. So yes, we have studied the disqualification and qualification sections in our earlier part of the lectures of audit. And yes, guys, marathon videos are already on my YouTube channel. You can go over there and watch the marathon videos. The benefit of marathon videos is that they would help you to quickly revise your entire syllabus in a span of say 4 to 5 hours. That's it. In 4 to 5 hours, you can just use your headphone, revise it, just listen to it again and again and again, and you'll be able to revise your entire syllabus in maximum 4 to 5 hours using the marathon videos. So the prerequisite before appointment of auditor, what are the requirements which we need to have from the auditor before his appointment is that before appointment of the auditor is made, following certificates are required to be obtained from the auditor. Guys, auditors should submit certain certificates to the company's board before being appointed as the auditor. We need some declarations from the auditors, because guys, we cannot go inside home of auditor, we cannot go inside office of auditor and check whether he's eligible to be appointed as the auditor. We cannot ask him that, oh, please show us your chartered accountancy degree, please show us your final mark sheet, please show us your certificate of practice. We cannot go and approach him and tell him, please show us, because we don't know whether you are a chartered accountant or not. We cannot do that. And if we cannot do that, guys, we will take all these things in writing from a chartered accountant. So what are the certificates which we need from the chartered accountant before being appointed as the auditor? Number one, the auditor is eligible for appointment under Companies Act 2013. So the first certificate which we need, the first declaration which we need from our auditor is that he is perfectly eligible in all respects. He is not disqualified in any of the sections which are provided under the Companies Act 2013 and the accompanying rules, that he is absolutely perfect in being eligible for being appointed as the auditor. The first and foremost certificate is this: the Chartered Accountants Act and the rules and regulations made there under. So first certificate is that he is fit to be appointed as the auditor of our company under the Companies Act. Because guys, naturally, practically, on a practical level, we cannot make sure how many clients does he already have. Section 141(3)(g), where we had discussed that there is a capping on number of audits which one auditor can undertake. We cannot have control of what are his clients, whether he has finished his 20 limit of companies or not. We cannot have control over it. So we cannot inquire about it. So we need a certificate from him that he has the necessary limit which is prescribed under section 141(3)(g). So he should be eligible to be appointed as the auditor of our company. This is the certificate which we want from him. Second, the proposed appointment is as per the terms provided under Companies Act. Now, the appointment which is being proposed. So first is the eligibility, that yes, he is in a fit position to acquire our audit. This is the first declaration which we want from him. And the second declaration is that if we propose to appoint him as our auditor, he will fulfill the conditions of Companies Act. He will not be out of Companies Act. So first is that the auditor appointed is fit to be appointed as the auditor as per the Companies Act as well as the Chartered Accountancy Act. And the second is that the proposed appointment is also as per the regulations of Companies Act 2013. So guys, the minute difference between point 1 and 2 is, in point number 1, the person should be fit. Point number 2, the activity of appointment should be fit. Let me repeat. In point number 1, the person should be fit. The person as in, he should be a chartered accountant. He should have certificate of practice. He should have his firm. He should have a partnership firm or a proprietorship firm, and he's authorized to sign as an auditor. He has every necessary thing which is required to be able to sign the audit report. He has everything which will enable him to be an auditor. He should have everything. So first point is related to that person. That person should be fit to be appointed as the auditor. And the second part is related to this particular appointment, that our appointment, means our company's appointment letter which we will give to the chartered accountant. If we give that letter to the chartered accountant, then this activity of carrying out audit will be under purview of Companies Act 2013. So very minuscule, very minor difference. The person should be fit, as well as the activity of auditing our company should be fit. And naturally, auditing our company, the second fitment is covering that condition also, guys, 141(3)(g), that the auditor is fit, but if he already has lapsed the limit of 20 audits, then he would not be able to undertake our audit. So that limit should also be there with the auditor. So this is point number 2. Point number 3. The list of proceedings against the auditor or audit firm or any partner of the audit firm pending with respect to professional matters of conduct as disclosed in the certificate is true and correct. So guys, we need to be sure that whatever pending matters are there with the auditor for his misconduct, for any kind of misdeed which he has done in past, that entire list is provided to us. Why do we need it, sir? What's our botheration? Why do we need the list of pending cases which are against the auditors? Why do we need those cases? We are not bothered about what auditor has done in his past, sir. We want to get our audit done of our company now. Why should we need this particular detail? Why should we need the detail of what are the list of proceedings which are pending against him? Guys, the list is needed because if the auditor has been convicted for a term exceeding 6 months for a fraud or for an activity which is related to fraud, then he is debarred from auditing any other company for a period of 10 years. So guys, we need to know as the company that whether any proceeding is being carried out against the auditor. Because if tomorrow that proceeding is finalized and if our auditor is convicted, then guys, our auditor will no longer remain the auditor of the company, and then we will be responsible for hiring a new auditor. So we should know what are the pending proceedings which are going on against the auditor. So this is the certificate which we need from the auditor. These are the 3 certificates which we need from the auditor. And yes, the 4th certificate which is the auditor satisfies the criteria provided under section 141 of the Companies Act. This is a specific section, guys, a specific certificate whereby we will be assured that all the qualifications which are required to be there for a statutory auditor, all the disqualifications which are required to be there for the statutory auditor, all the necessary hygiene checks which we need to perform before adopting that auditor as an auditor are done. We'll be making sure by this certificate. So next is the certificate with respect to 141. And guys, a small addition which we have already studied, ADT 1 is to be filed within 15 days of meeting which the auditor is appointed. So ADT 1 is to be filed with the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, informing them that yes, this is the auditor whom we have appointed for the year under consideration. Okay sir, let's move on to the next change guys. So there are no changes. Okay, this is a very minor change, read with rule 7, that's okay. I've inserted certain forms, these are important forms, so again minor changes. We'll move on to the major changes. Yes guys, now the responsibility of the auditor to report on frauds. This is a very important aspect which was there in earlier also in syllabus, it was there in my book also, it was there, but now this aspect, that is a responsibility of the auditor with respect to frauds, is to be dealt in a very detailed manner. So I have dealt with it over here, which we will cover. The if there's some fraud which is happening in the company, what should be the auditor's responsibility with respect to that fraud. So I have covered this section over here in great detail, but before coming on to this section, I would like to first discuss the prior amendment which has been done, or the introduction of one more rule which is done by the institute. Other matters to be included in the auditor's report. So auditor's report, as you are aware that the points covered by Caro are definitely included in the auditor's report, which I have already discussed in detail. The points which are there for Caro, all those points are already to be disclosed, to be discussed by the auditor in its audit report. Guys, apart from Caro points, there are certain points which we need to disclose in our auditor's report also, or at least discuss in our auditor's report, or at least consider it while constructing our auditor's report. And where does this come from? Let's see footnote number 13. It again comes from the rules which are Companies Audit and Auditors Rule 2014. So the auditors shall also include their views and comments on the following matters. So auditors should include their views and comments on the following matters. Which are those matters? Whether the company has disclosed the impact, if any, of pending litigations in its financial position, in its financial statements. Guys, litigation is one such thing that can make your business haywire. The case of all the telecom giants in India struggling to pay their ADR dues to the telecom regulator in the country is a live example of what can happen if any pending litigation is against a particular company. So guys, today the telecom giants of India, Vodafone, Airtel, Idea, all these telecom giants are struggling before the Ministry of Telecommunication. Why? Because they have lost a case with a Supreme Court with respect to the ADR or AGR dues which they had to give to the telecom regulator, TRAI. So guys, consider a situation where 5 years back the auditors were aware about the pending litigation, but they were not aware about the outcome, so they did not discuss it in the auditor's report. Suddenly one fine day the outcome came negative, it came against the telecom player, and suddenly there was a cash outflow of 12,000 crores from the kitty of the telecom regulators. Such a big blow, such a big problem with the telecom regulators, guys. Due to this particular aspect, it is recommended that, or not only recommended, but it's mandatory that the auditor should disclose the details of all the pending litigations which are there against the company in the financial statements, and the impact of that pending litigation on the financial statements. The auditor is obliged to do this. So the first thing which auditor needs to report is whether the company has disclosed the impact, if any, of pending litigations on its financial position in its financial statements. Second, whether the company has made provision as required under any law or accounting standards for material foreseeable losses, if any, on long-term contracts, including derivative contracts. Now here, guys, the auditor has to really act as a crystal ball gazer. So just like crystal ball gazer would preempt any losses which would come in future, or any problems which would come on you in future, just like the crystal ball gazer do that, auditors are also expected to forecast the foreseeable loss. Guys, we need not be in a time machine and go in the future and see what losses are coming, come back and report it in our audit report. We need not do that. But certain things are obvious. For example, if you have a pending litigation which there you have many cases which are against you, and the cases which are against you are really a strong proof before the auditor that this case is going to be lost by the company. If that is the situation, then there is no rocket science in estimating the amount of cash outflow which will happen if this case is lost. So simple. The auditor can foresee the loss which will happen to the company, and the company has to make a provision for this foreseeable loss, which auditor has to ensure that yes, company has made adequate provisions for this foreseeable loss. So this is the second point. Third point, whether there has been any delay in transferring the amounts required to be transferred to Investor Education Protection Fund by the company. So guys, there are various provisions with respect to transfer of certain funds in the investors education and protection fund by the company. One of the instances is that if dividends are not claimed by the shareholders, then guys, that dividend beyond a stipulated time is transferred to the IEPF account. It is transferred. It is not to be used by the company for any other purpose, but the company has to transfer it to the IEPF account. So guys, auditors need to be very sure, they need to be 100% sure that the company has on time, within time, transferred all the sums which were eligible to be transferred to the IPF account. The company has transferred those amounts. So this is the third requirement, or the third matter which is to be included in the auditor's report. Fourth matter which is to be included in the auditor's report is that whether the company has adequate internal financial control system and there exists operating effectiveness. Now this is a very, very important point, guys. I have discussed the concept of financial controls in detail in my earlier lectures, and let me brief it out for you. Financial controls mean that even before the auditors come inside the company, even before the auditors enters the company's management should ensure that all the transactions are being recorded in the books of accounts in a correct manner. That is the responsibility of the management. Now, how does management do that? Guys, management would do that by rotation of duties. One person should not be on one duty for a long time, because then he becomes comfortable, and then chances of errors being creeped in are more. Then one transaction should be overlooked by two people, so that if error happens, then if the error happens by one of the persons, then other person is able to point out that error. These kind of controls are to be infused in a particular company with respect to the finances, the financial accounts and the financial statements. And guys, these controls are an important element of responsibility of a particular company. So, as an auditor, how would I be benefited from these controls, or how would I be impacted by these controls? Guys, auditors are also impacted by these controls, because if the controls are strong which are employed by the company, then auditor's procedure will be less. And if the controls are weak in a particular company, auditors procedures will be high. So auditors sometimes rely on the financial controls which are being employed by the company. So definitely it will impact the auditor's audit procedures also. So it has a far-reaching impact. So the requirement is that the auditor should include whether the company has an adequate internal financial control system and there exists operating effectiveness. Then guys, most important amendment or most important inclusion in your syllabus, reporting of fraud by the auditor. Now, you obviously know the difference between audit and investigation. There are two things, audit and investigation. You are an auditor, not an investigator. So if any fraud is detected by you, then that fraud should definitely be reported to the management. That's it. You need not investigate into that fraud. You need not say that, oh, let me see from where did this fraud arise, or from where did I, from how much is the quantity of this fraud. You need not do that. So I'll give you a practical example. So guys, Mr. A is auditor of a particular company, and Mr. A is auditing marketing expenses of that particular company. So marketing expenses means the expenses which are done by a particular company on its advertisement, on its publicizing its own products. During course of reviewing the bills of marketing, guys, that particular auditor finds out certain fake bills inside the marketing expenses. So marketing expenses total worth of 5 crore rupees, and out of those 5 crore rupees, there were fake bills worth, say, 2 crore rupees. They were fake bills. So what do you mean by fake bills? Fake bill means that on the heading of the bill it is written that XYZ Pump Works Company, and on the main part of the bill it says that 10 canopies purchased or 10 banners purchased to be put in Delhi and NCR. Guys, this is an anomaly. Why would a pumping company, a company which supplies water pumps, supply banner or canopy? Canopy is the four-legged temporary erection which happens for publicity. Guys, why would a motor company supply canopy to the company worth rupees 1 lakh rupees? Why would it do that? It won't do that. So in this circumstance, you as an auditor might be lured to wear that overcoat which will run beyond your knees, wear a goggles, shades and a hat, and say that, oh, I am the detective now. Let me visit this pump company and let me see whether this pump company supplies banners or not. Let me go to the company and check, and let me inquire from that company whether they have sold canopies and banners to the main company or not. Let me do this. Guys, you cannot do this. You cannot do this. You just have to report this particular fact of your invoices not being in synchronization with the expenses which are being recorded. You just have to disclose this fact to the management and ask a reply from the management. You cannot wear hat of a detective and have that magnifying glass with you, with glasses. You cannot do that and approach the other side of the other party, and just ask them, oh, did you supply canopies and banners to my client? You cannot do that. Investigation is very different from audit. You have to be an investigator to investigate, and you are not an investigator, you are an auditor. You just believe on the prima facie evidence, the documentary evidence. That's it. You believe on those evidences. You do not actually have conclusive proofs and go to the location and just inquire or just investigate about the actual situation. You cannot do that. So guys, in case you encounter any fraud, in case you encounter some good reasons whereby you can say that something weird is happening with the company and there's something fraud, something which is not as per your understanding has been detected. If you come across any such thing, then instead of investigating, you should follow the aforesaid principle, the aforesaid procedure. Let's see what is the procedure. It is given in Rule 13 of the rules. So it says that the provision of Companies Act regarding reporting of frauds by a company auditors are as follows. In case the auditor has sufficient reason to believe. So first of all, you have to have sufficient reason to believe. It should not be on your whims and fancies. It should not be on your just your assumption or just your presumption, or you thought of that there is a fraud, or you dreamt that this company is having a fraud. You need to have sufficient reasons to believe that an offence involving fraud, which involves or is expected to involve an amount of rupees 1 crore or above, is being or has been committed against the company or by the officers or employees of the company. He shall report the matter to the central government immediately, but not later than 60 days of knowledge. So within 60 days, so first of all, the turnover is 1 crore or above. If the fraud is worth 1 crore or above, then you need to disclose this fraud related instruction or fraud related information to the central government. Within how much time span? 60 days, guys, not more than 60 days. Within 60 days, you need to inform the central government. But you do not have to go to the central government directly. And one more point. Guys, before approaching the central government, from which date will this 60 days start? it will start from the date when auditor came to notice of this particular fraud, came to knowledge about this particular fraud. From that date, 60 days will start. So from that date till 60th day, you can inform it to the central government, but before informing it to the central government, you need to follow the following procedure. Procedure is as under. Auditor shall forward his report to the board or the audit committee, as the case may be, immediately within 2 days. So the board of directors should be aware about this fraud within 2 days after he comes to knowledge of the fraud, seeking their reply or observations within 45 days. So guys, 45 days, first 45 days are to be given to the board of directors to respond on this particular fraud. So you have to wait till 45th day, the board of directors should be required to respond to this particular fraud. On receipt of such reply or observations, auditor shall forward his report and reply or observations of the board or audit committee, along with his comments on such reply or observations of the board of audit committee, to the central government within 15 days of receipt of such reply. So soon as reply comes from the board of directors, which should be within 45 days of telling them, soon as the report comes from them, then auditor should analyze that report, read that report, consider that report, and submit his final report to the central government within 15 days. So 45 days plus 15 days, 60 days is the maximum tenure when a fraud is to be reported to the central government. You cannot go at any cost beyond 60 days, sir. But what will happen if on the 45th day board of directors refuse to give any report? Board of directors are telling you, the auditors, oh, we are aware about this fraud, we are not giving you any reports. Sir, then what will happen? Naturally, guys, the report which is to be prepared by you will again go to the central government within 15 days, and that report will contain a fact that you were asking the management to respond on this particular fraud, but they refused to respond on this particular fraud. You will have to disclose this fact also in your report and submit it to the central government. Let's read. In case the auditor fails to get a reply or observation from the board or audit committee within the stipulated period of 45 days, he shall forward his report to the central government along with a note containing the details of the report that was earlier forwarded to the board or the audit committee, for which he failed to receive any reply or observation within the stipulated time. But you as an auditor cannot at any cost default or let this 60-day tenure go away. You cannot do that. 60 days is the ultimate timeline, the ultimate deadline by which any case of fraud should be reported to the central government, to the Ministry of Corporate Affairs regarding any and every company. Okay, sir. The report shall be sent to the Secretary, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, in a sealed cover by registered post with acknowledgement due or by speed post, followed by an email in confirmation of the same. Then the report should be on the letterhead of the auditor. This is most important, that who's signing that report. That letterhead should be there, containing postal address, email address, contract number, signed by the auditor with his seal, and shall indicate his membership number. So the CA membership number, we are talking about chartered accountancy over here, CA membership number should be there, and that particular details of that particular chartered accountant should be attested in this particular letter or note. Now, so what will happen if cost auditor comes to knowledge of any fraud? Guys, same rule, same procedure is applicable to cost auditor as well. Cost auditor also has to report to the central government about any fraud, any kind of misdeed which is happening in the company. Same procedure will be followed by the cost auditor as well. Okay, sir. The report shall be in form of statement as specified in form ADT 4. So ADT 4 is the form in which the fraud related matters is to be disclosed to the central government. Okay, case B. Guys, case B is where the fraud is below 1 crore rupees. What happens then? In case of a fraud involving lesser than rupee 1 crore, the auditor shall report the matter to the audit committee constituted under section 177 or to the board immediately, but not later than 2 days of his knowledge of fraud. And he shall report the matter specifying the following. Now guys, if the fraud is below 1 crore, then you need not mess up with the ministry. You need not consult the ministry, or you need not approach the ministry. Then you just need to tell the board of directors. But in your audit report, by way of the annual report, you should ensure that the disclosure about this fraud is given so that the shareholders are aware about this fraud. And what is the disclosure required? Nature of fraud, approximate amount involved, parties involved. This is to be done by the this is to be ensured by the auditor, that in the annual report or in the board's report, the company should disclose about this fraud so that at least the shareholders should be made aware. Ministry of Corporate Affairs is not bothered because the fraud is involving 1 crores or less. That's okay. Ministry is not required to be informed, but the board of directors are required to be informed. Common points for both A and B above. The provision of this rule shall also mutus mutandis. What do you mean by mutus mutandis? Guys, it is as it is. As it is. So this is a legal word which we use in the legal arena. So the provision of this rule shall also, as it is, apply to the cost auditors and the secretarial auditors. So secretarial auditors are also required to be fulfilling these 60-day criteria, and the cost auditor are also required to be fulfill this criteria. Following details of fraud shall be disclosed in board's report: nature of fraud, approximate amount, parties involved, and remedial actions taken. All these things are to be disclosed in board records. Because guys, okay, we are not informing to the ministry. Very cool with it, very okay with it. Why? Because Companies Act is not requiring us to do, but at least the shareholders should be made aware about it. So whether you inform the ministry or not, whether the fraud is 1 crore above or not, you should disclose the details about this fraud in the board report so that shareholders are aware about it. Okay, sir, got it. Now let's move on to the next amendment which has been made in the powers of audit committee. Guys, the powers of audit committee, as I've already told you, audit committee is primarily looking at the financial health of a particular company. So if I were to say that you have doctors in your home, sometimes you call doctors to your home, sometimes there are family doctors who know the history of the problems or health issues which this family has, and that family doctor treats everyone in the family. Similarly, guys, financial health is to be taken care by an in-house doctor, and that in-house doctor's name is audit committee. The outside doctor's name is auditor. So first we would like to consult our in-house doctor, who's the audit committee, and then we would like to refer the matter to the outside doctor, which is the auditor. So what are the powers of audit committee? Guys, these four powers have been inserted. Power to investigate into any matter under purview of audit committee. So obviously investigation is one of the important elements of audit committee. Auditors are not authorized to investigate, but audit committee is authorized to investigate. Auditors just have to do audit. Audit means it has to be done by the proofs, by the prima facie evidence which is available with the auditors. Auditors cannot go to the root of the cause and cannot investigate or cannot go beyond his scope in auditing, but audit committee can. So the next one is that auditors of the company and key managerial personnel shall have the right to be heard into the meeting. So audit committee should work in close proximity or should work in close synchronization with the auditors of the company and the key management personnel of the company. So audit committee has the power to call the auditors in the meetings or key management personnel in the meeting and to ask them questions about the financial health of a particular company. So audit committee has these powers to even call for information from the auditors or the key managerial personnel of the company. Then composition of audit committee is to be disclosed in the board's report. Who is the part of audit committee? Because audit committee is one of the most important committees which will regulate the financial health of a particular company. So who is forming part of the audit committee? Who are the individuals who are part of the audit committee, and whether the audit committee is constituted as per the law, governing law, which is the Companies Act? All these questions are to be answered and to be disclosed in the board's report. The audit committee have the power to get itself disclosed, get its composition disclosed in the board's report. Why? Because anyone who has problem with the financial health of the company can directly, straight away approach the audit committee. Then last, in case recommendations of audit committee is not accepted by the board, like we had seen one example, guys, just now, that audit committee is recommending Mr. B as the auditor. Board of directors are recommending Mr. A as the auditor. board of directors are saying no, we are not ready to go with Mr. B, we will hire Mr. A as the auditor of the company, then the audit committee should have written representation from the board that why its decision was not honored, why was there a deviation from what has been decided by the audit committee. It has the power to summon or to call for explanation from the board. So in case recommendation of audit committee is not accepted by the board shall disclose the board's report along with the reasons. So audit committee has the power to get reasons why were their recommendations not accepted by the board. So yes, these were the four additions to the powers of audit committee. And guys, this doesn't relate to any law which has been recently introduced. This was probably the expansion of the rules which have already been notified by the rules, and we have introduced certain rules with a more in-depth knowledge of these rules, because obviously the primary thing behind any audit is to follow the rules and regulations and the framework within which audit will be done. That framework is very, very important, and the student should be made aware about that framework in great detail. So this was the idea, I guess, behind using such extensive measures of developing these frameworks. So yes, please be happy, please smile. These were the only changes which were there in the supplementary. That's it. Would it take even more than, say, an hour or two for you to revise all of them? Answer is no, it won't. So all your worries, all your tensions, all your nervousness, I hope, will be released after this video, and you will be able to focus in your examination with all the more great in-depth detail. Guys, once again, to reiterate, my video lectures marathon on audit marathon, in which I have discussed the entire chapter in a mere half an hour or 40 minutes. Guys, whenever you are traveling in metro, whenever you are traveling in bus, or whenever you are free, just put your headphones on and just listen to those videos which I have put in the in my YouTube channel, the audit marathon videos. I have compiled a marathon video of all the chapters of audit and have put in over there. So please make best use of it. Just hear to those audit marathon videos at least for 5 times before your examination, and I can guarantee you that you will be able to secure above 40 marks out of 50 marks in audit. So yes, hope to see some 80s and 90s score in June 2020 examination. And guys, the examination is really close now, so please be really equipped, please be geared up for the examination, because it's not very far now. I hope your studies are going to the best level. We'll be meeting in our subsequent videos where I'll be discussing with more such important updates regarding the syllabus. Till that time, all the very best and happy studying.